Human mechanic fights a storm to save a spaceship. Something in the mud is alive. Part 1. The ship fell from the sky like a burning stone. Park pulled hard on the controls as alarms screamed all around her. Red lights flashed across every screen. The cargo freighter Wandering Star was dying, and she was the only one who could save it. "Engine 3 is gone," shouted Captain from behind her. The tall officer gripped his seat with long, thin fingers. His pale blue skin had turned almost white with fear. "We are going to crash." "I know," shouted back. She did not have time to explain. She did not have time for anything except keeping this ship from breaking apart. Through the front window, she could see the surface of 7 rushing toward them. It was a world of endless swamps and thick mud. Dark clouds covered the sky. Rain fell in sheets. It was not a good place to crash, but it was the only choice they had. "Hold on," pulled the nose up at the last moment. The Wandering Star hit the mud flat at a terrible angle. The impact threw everyone forward. Metal screamed. Glass broke. Something heavy fell from the ceiling and struck's right leg. Pain exploded through her body and she cried out. Then everything went still. For a long moment, no one moved. The ship groaned and settled deeper into the mud. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a dim red glow. "Is everyone alive?" a calm voice asked. Looked up, Sung stood in the doorway of the bridge. The human mechanic had a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were steady. He looked around the room, checking each person quickly. "I am alive," said the young navigator. She was shaking but unhurt. Captain stood slowly. His uniform was torn and his hands trembled. "This is a disaster," he said. "A complete disaster." Sung moved toward the pilot's seat. "Are you hurt?" "My leg," she said through her teeth. "Something hit it. I cannot move it without pain." Sung knelt beside her and looked at the injury. His face stayed calm but could see the worry in his eyes. "It might be broken," he said. "We need to keep you still." "There is no time for this," said. His voice was rising with panic. "The storm sensors are showing a Category 8 storm approaching. Do you understand what that means? We have 6 hours, maybe less. If we are still on this planet when that storm hits, we die." Sung stood and faced the captain. "Then we fix the ship." "Fix it?" laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "The main thruster coupling is cracked. The coolant lines are ruptured. Half the external systems are damaged, and look outside. We are sinking into mud." Sung walked to a side window and looked out. The captain was right. The ship sat in thick, dark mud that reached halfway up the hull. Slow bubbles rose to the surface. The rain that fell was not normal rain. It had a yellow-green color, and where it touched the ship's metal skin, small wisps of smoke rose up. Acid rain. Sung had read about 7 before this mission. The planet was famous for 2 things: endless mud and rain that could burn through most materials. "They cannot go outside," said quietly. "Our skin cannot survive the acid. Even a few minutes of exposure would cause serious burns. And we lack the physical strength for heavy repair work," added. He said it like a fact, not an excuse. They were a species built for thinking, not for labor. Their bodies were tall and elegant, but also fragile. "This is why we hire human crews for cargo runs to dangerous worlds." Sung nodded slowly. "Then I will go outside." "Alone?" Tried to sit up, then gasped at the pain in her leg. "Sung, that is too dangerous. The repairs you are talking about would take a full crew working in good conditions. You would be alone in acid rain with a storm coming." "Do we have another choice?" No one answered. Shook his head. "This is suicide. No one could complete those repairs under such conditions. We should send a distress signal and hope for rescue." "The storm will destroy us before any rescue arrives," said softly. "The nearest station is 12 hours away at fastest speed." "Then we die here," sat down heavily in his chair. "There is nothing to be done." Sung looked at the captain for a long moment. Then he looked at. She met his eyes and something passed between them. They had worked together for 2 years. She knew what kind of man he was. She knew he would not sit and wait for death. "Go," she said. "I will guide you through the repairs from here, can give you the technical readings." Sung said, "Keep that leg still. I will need you to fly us out of here when I am done." She managed a small smile despite the pain. "Just finish the job, mechanic." Sung left the bridge and walked through the damaged corridors of the ship. Water dripped from broken pipes. Sparks flew from damaged wires. The wandering star was in bad shape, but she was not dead yet. Ships were like people in that way. They could take a lot of damage and still keep fighting. In the equipment room, he found his environmental suit. It was old and had been patched many times. It was not the best protection against acid rain, but it was all he had. He checked the seals carefully, tested the oxygen supply, and gathered his tools. A heavy wrench, a welding torch, sealant gel, cutting tools. He packed everything he might need into a bag and hung it across his chest. As he walked to the airlock, his voice came through the ship's speakers. "Sung, the external sensors are showing something strange." He stopped. "What kind of strange?" "Movement in the mud around the ship. Something large is circling us." Sung felt a cold feeling in his stomach. 7 was supposed to be lifeless. The surveys had shown no animals, no dangerous creatures, but surveys could be wrong. "Can you see what it is?" "No, the rain is too heavy for visual sensors, but the motion trackers are certain. Something is out there, something alive." Sung stood at the airlock door. Through the small window, he could see the yellow-green rain falling, the dark mud stretching in every direction, and the clouds growing thicker as the storm approached. Somewhere out there, hidden in that mud, something was moving. He thought about going back. He thought about sitting in his chair, waiting to die. He thought about with her broken leg, trusting him to save them all. He opened the airlock. The outer door slid apart, and the sound of rain filled his ears. The smell of chemicals and rot came through his helmet filters. The mud below the airlock was less than a meter down. He could jump it easily. Sung took a deep breath. Then he jumped into the storm. Human mechanic fights a storm to save a spaceship. Something in the mud is alive. Part 2. The mud grabbed at Sung's boots the moment he landed. It was thick and heavy, like wet concrete. Each step required real effort. He sank to his knees, and the dark liquid made sucking sounds as he pulled his legs free. The rain fell in sheets around him, hitting his suit with a constant hiss. Already he could see small marks forming on his gloves where the acid ate at the material. He had 6 hours, maybe less. "Sung, can you hear me?" His voice came through the radio in his helmet. "I hear you." "Good. The thruster coupling is on the starboard side, near the rear. You will need to climb onto the lower hull section." He looked at the ship rising above him. The wandering star was tilted at an ugly angle, half buried in the swamp. Her metal skin was scratched and dented from the crash. In the dim light of the stormy afternoon, she looked wounded, like a great beast that had fallen and could not rise. Sung began to move toward the rear of the ship. Every step was a battle. The mud did not want to let him go. It pulled at his feet, tried to swallow him deeper. But he was strong, and he had worked in bad conditions before. He pushed forward. "The sensors still show movement," said. "Approximately 20 meters to your left." Sung stopped and looked in that direction. He saw nothing but mud and rain. The surface of the swamp was flat and still, except for the ripples made by falling rain. But somewhere beneath that surface, something was watching him. "Keep me updated," he said, "but I cannot stop working because of it." "Understood." He reached the rear section of the ship and found a maintenance ladder built into the hull. It was covered in mud and acid residue, but the rungs held his weight. He climbed carefully until he reached the damaged area. The thruster coupling was worse than he expected. A long crack ran through the metal casing. Coolant had leaked out and frozen in strange patterns on the hull. Several bolts had sheared off completely during the crash. To fix this properly would take hours of work in a proper repair bay. Out here, in acid rain with a storm coming, it seemed impossible. But impossible was just a word. Sung opened his tool bag and got to work. He started with the crack. The welding torch hummed to life in his hands, and he began to seal the broken metal. Sparks flew, mixing with the rain. The heat of the torch fought against the cold wind that was starting to blow. He worked slowly, carefully, making sure each weld was strong. Inside the ship, watched the external cameras. She saw the small figure of the human working against the huge shape of the damaged ship. It seemed so small, so fragile. How could one person hope to save them all? "His work is excellent," she said without meaning to speak aloud. Captain looked up from his chair. He had not moved since Sung left. "What did you say?" "The human, his welding technique, it is very precise." Made a dismissive sound. "Humans are built for labor. It is what they are good for. That does not mean he will succeed." On the main screen, watched her friend work. Her leg hurt with every heartbeat, but she refused the pain medication had offered. She needed to stay alert. She needed to guide Sung through the repairs. "Sung," she said into the radio, "how is the first weld holding?" "Solid so far. I am starting the second section now." "Good. Remember, the coupling needs to be sealed completely. Even a small gap will cause the thruster to fail during launch." "I know, trust me." She wanted to trust him. She did trust him, but she also knew what he was facing out there. The acid rain would slowly eat through his suit. The cold would drain his strength. And that thing in the mud. She said, "Where is the creature now?" The navigator checked her sensors. "It has moved closer, 15 meters from his position. It is circling slowly." "Can we warn him?" "I am listening," Sung's voice came through. "I know it is there. I can feel the mud moving." He was not wrong. As he worked on the second weld, he felt the ground beneath his feet shift in ways that had nothing to do with the sinking ship. Something was pushing through the mud below him, something large. Then he saw it. A shape rose from the mud about 10 meters away. It was not like any creature Sung had ever seen. It had no clear body, no eyes, no mouth that he could identify. It was more like the mud itself had decided to become alive. A mass of dark liquid that held its shape against the rain, with tendrils that moved like curious fingers. Sung froze. The welding torch still burned in his hand. His heart beat hard in his chest. The creature moved closer. It made no sound. It left no wake in the mud. It simply flowed toward him like a slow wave. "Sung, what is happening?" His voice was sharp with worry. "I see it," he said quietly. "It is looking at me." "Get back to the ship." "If I stop now, the weld will not hold. If the weld does not hold, we cannot launch. If we cannot launch, we all die." The creature came within 3 meters of him. One of its tendrils extended forward, reaching toward his boot. Sung watched it come. He did not run. He did not move. The tendril touched his boot gently. It stayed there for a moment as if testing the material. Then it pulled back. The creature did not attack. It simply watched. Sung let out a long breath. "It is not hostile," he said. "At least not yet. I am going to keep working." "Are you insane?" shouted into the radio. "Return to the ship immediately. That is an order." "With respect, Captain, if I come back now, we are all dead. I will take my chances with the creature." He turned back to his work. His hands were shaking slightly, but he forced them to be steady. The welding torch touched metal. Sparks flew. Behind him, he could feel the creature watching. The wind grew stronger. The first real gusts of the approaching storm began to hit. Sung had to grip the ship's hull to keep from being blown off. Rain hit his faceplate so hard he could barely see. He wiped it clear with his glove and kept working. An hour passed, then 2. The crack in the thruster coupling was sealed, but the work was not done. The coolant lines were next, and they were in even worse shape. Several sections had ruptured completely. Sung would need to cut out the damaged parts and replace them with emergency patches from his kit. "How are you feeling?" asked. "Tired, cold. My suit has burns in 3 places now. The patches are holding, but I do not know for how long. The storm will hit full force in about 3 hours. Can you finish in time?" Sung looked at the work still ahead of him. Then he looked at the creature which had not left. It had stayed close, watching everything he did. "I will finish," he said. "I have to." A strong gust of wind hit him from the side. His feet slipped on the wet hull. For one terrible moment he was falling. His tools flew from his hands. He reached out desperately for something to grab. His fingers found nothing but air. Then something caught him. A tendril of mud wrapped around his wrist, stopping his fall. The creature had moved faster than he could see. It held him firmly against the hull until the wind eased. Then slowly, it let go. Sung hung there, breathing hard. The creature had saved him. This strange thing of living mud had saved a human it had never seen before. Sung's voice was frightened. "What happened? We saw you fall." He looked at the creature. In the dim light, through the rain, it almost seemed like the thing was waiting for an answer. "I am okay," he said finally. "I had some help." The creature pulsed once, a ripple running through its body. Then it settled back into stillness. Sung reached down carefully and picked up his dropped tools. The creature watched but did not interfere. He went back to work. But now, as he repaired the coolant lines, he was not alone. The creature stayed close, and when the wind blew hard, he could feel it ready to catch him again. Whatever this thing was, it was not his enemy. He just hoped he would live long enough to understand why. Human mechanic fights a storm to save a spaceship. Something in the mud is alive. Part 3. The storm was growing stronger. Sung could feel it in the way the wind screamed past his helmet. He could see it in the way the rain fell sideways now, hitting him like tiny acid bullets. His suit had more burn marks than he could count. The patches were holding, but just barely. He had been working for 3 hours. The thruster coupling was fixed. Half the coolant lines were repaired. But there was still so much to do, and the creature of living mud had not left his side. It stayed close, always watching. Sometimes it would reach out a tendril to touch the ship or to brush against his boot as if checking that he was still there. At first this had made Sung nervous. Now, strangely, he found it comforting. He was not alone out here. "Sung's voice came through his radio. "I have been analyzing the creature's movements. It responds to vibrations." "What do you mean?" "Every time you use the welding torch or the hammer, it moves closer. When you are still, it moves away slightly. I think it senses the world through vibrations in the mud and air." Sung thought about this. If the creature felt vibrations, maybe he could communicate with it. It seemed strange to try to talk to something made of mud, but nothing about this day had been normal. He reached out and tapped his knuckles against the ship's hull. 3 quick taps. The creature immediately turned toward him. Its body rippled with interest. Sung tapped again, 3 slow taps this time. The creature moved closer. One of its tendrils rose from the mud and touched the hull next to his hand. Then, very clearly, it tapped 3 times. Inside the ship gasped. "Did you see that?" It him. Even leaned forward in his chair, his dismissive expression replaced by something like shock. Smiled despite her pain. "Sung, I think you just made first contact. Let me try something else." Sung tapped a pattern, 2 quick, 1 slow, 2 quick. The creature waited a moment. Then it tapped back, 2 quick, 1 slow, 2 quick. It was not just copying, it was listening, it was learning. Sung felt a strange warmth in his chest. Here he was, on a hostile planet in the middle of a deadly storm, and he had found something wonderful. A life form that no one knew existed, an intelligence hidden in the mud of this swamp world. "Hello," he said softly, even though he knew it could not understand words. "My name is Sung. I am trying to fix my ship so my friends and I can go home." The creature pulsed. It could not understand his words, but it seemed to sense his tone. Something about its body language felt less wary now, more curious. "I do not think it has ever seen anything like us," said. "The surveys of this planet found no intelligent life, but perhaps they were not looking in the right places. Or perhaps," added, "they did not try to talk to the mud." Sung went back to work on the coolant lines. As he moved around the ship, the creature followed. When he needed to stand in a particular spot, the mud beneath his feet would suddenly become more solid, easier to stand on. The creature was helping him. "It is making platforms for me," Sung reported. "Hard spots in the mud where I need to work." "Remarkable," whispered. "This changes nothing," said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "We still need to escape this planet. The storm is still coming." He was right about that. The wind was now howling constantly. Sung had to shout into his radio to be heard. The rain had become so heavy that he could barely see 3 meters in front of him. His hands were numb with cold despite his gloves. But he kept working. Another hour passed. The coolant lines were almost done. Just one more section needed to be sealed, and then the ship would be ready to fly. Sung allowed himself to feel hope. Then disaster struck. A gust of wind hit harder than any before. It tore the sealant gun from his hands and sent it spinning into the darkness. Without that tool, he could not finish the repair. Without the repair, the ship could not launch. Without the launch, everyone would die. "No," Sung reached out desperately, but the tool was gone. "What happened?" His voice was sharp. "I lost the sealant gun. The wind took it. I cannot finish without it." Silence on the radio. Everyone understood what this meant. Then Sung felt something touch his arm. He looked down and saw the creature's tendril wrapped gently around his wrist. It tugged at him, trying to get his attention. He turned to look at the creature fully. Its body was moving strangely, stretching out into the darkness beyond his sight. After a moment, the tendril tugged again, and then something was placed in his hand. The sealant gun. Sung stared at it in disbelief. The creature had found his tool. It had searched through the mud and the storm and brought it back to him. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you." The creature pulsed warmly in response. Inside the ship was crying. She did not try to hide it. It understood, she said. It saw that he needed help and it helped him. "Impossible," said, but his voice was weak. "It is just mud. It cannot think." "Captain," said quietly, "I believe you are wrong." Said nothing. She just watched the screen where her friend stood in the storm, holding a tool that an alien creature had returned to him. Humans were strange beings, she thought. They could find friends anywhere, even in the mud of a planet that wanted to kill them. Sung finished the last seal on the coolant lines. The repair was done. The ship could fly. But now the full storm was hitting. The wind became something more than wind. It became a force that wanted to tear him apart. Sung was thrown against the hull so hard that his helmet cracked. Acid rain poured in through the crack, burning his cheek. He cried out in pain. The creature moved instantly. It wrapped around his arm, covering the crack in his helmet with its own body. The acid touched the creature instead of him. Sung could see it steaming, could see the creature's surface burning, but it did not let go. It was protecting him with its own flesh. Sung screamed, "Get inside, the airlock is just 20 meters away." He tried to move, but the wind was too strong. He could not take a step without being blown over. The creature held him against the hull, keeping him from being swept away, but it could not help him walk. "I cannot move," he gasped. "The wind is too strong." The creature pulsed against his arm. Then Sung felt the mud beneath him shift. More shapes were rising from the swamp. 1, then 5, then a dozen. Other creatures coming to help. They formed a wall around him, a living barrier of mud creatures blocking the worst of the wind. Through their protection, Sung could stand. He could walk. "They are helping me," he said, amazed. "All of them, they are making a path to the ship." Step by step, surrounded by living mud, Sung moved toward the airlock. The storm raged above them, but the creatures held firm. They were saving his life. These things of mud and water, these beings that the surveys had said did not exist, were saving a human they had met only hours ago. He reached the airlock and hit the emergency button. Nothing happened. "The airlock is not opening. The storm damaged the outer seals. I am working on it from inside, but it will take time." Time he did not have. His suit was failing. The creature on his arm was still burning from the acid. The wind was trying to tear the wall of creatures apart. Sung sank down against the airlock door. Around him, the creatures pressed close, sharing their warmth, blocking the rain. They did not have to do this. They gained nothing from saving him, but they did it anyway. In the darkness and the storm, surrounded by beings made of mud, Sung waited to see if he would live or die. And the creatures waited with him. Human mechanic fights a storm to save a spaceship. Something in the mud is alive. Part 4. The storm screamed like a living thing. Sung pressed his back against the airlock door and tried to breathe. His cheek burned where the acid had touched it. His arm was wrapped in the body of the creature that refused to let go. Around him, the wall of mud creatures shook and trembled as the wind hit them again and again. But they did not break, they held. He said into his radio, his voice was weak, "How long?" "I am working as fast as I can. The outer seal mechanism is damaged. I need to bypass it manually." There was pain in her voice. Her broken leg must have been screaming at her, but she was working anyway. She never stopped. Inside the ship, watched the external cameras with tears still on her face. The image was blurred by rain and static, but she could see the shapes surrounding Sung. Dozens of creatures now, maybe more. They had come from all across the swamp to protect this one human. "Why are they doing this?" she asked. "They do not know him. They gain nothing from saving him." Stood at the window, staring out at the storm. He had not spoken in several minutes. Finally, he said, "Perhaps they do not need a reason." Looked at him in surprise. The captain had been dismissive of the creatures from the beginning. He had called them mud, primitives, things that could not think. Now his voice sounded different. "What do you mean?" "I have always believed that intelligent beings act for benefit, for profit, for advantage." Touched the window with his long fingers. "But these creatures are sacrificing themselves for a stranger. There is no logic in it, unless the logic is something I do not understand." Outside, the main creature that had been with Sung from the beginning tightened around his arm. Its body was badly burned from the acid. Parts of it had turned hard and gray where the rain had damaged it, but it did not let go. Sung reached out with his other hand and touched the creature gently. "You are hurt," he said. "You should leave, save yourself." The creature pulsed. It was a weak pulse, tired and pain, but it was clear. "No, I stay." Sung felt his eyes burn with tears that had nothing to do with acid. The ship groaned. The wandering star was still sinking into the mud, still being pushed and pulled by the storm. If they did not leave soon, the ship would sink too deep to escape. Then a new problem appeared. Sung's voice was frightened. "The ship is tilting. The mud on the port side is giving way." He could feel it. The airlock door behind him was shifting, moving as the ship leaned to one side. If it fell too far, the engines would be underwater. They would never launch. The creatures around him felt it too. They began to move with sudden purpose. Several of them sank back into the mud and disappeared. For a moment, Sung thought they were leaving, that they had finally decided to save themselves. Then he felt the ground shake. Not from the storm, not from the wind. Something was pushing upward from below. "What is happening?" asked. "I do not know. The creatures are doing something. They went under the ship." On the sensors saw it. The mud beneath the wandering star was moving, rising. Something underneath was pushing the entire ship upward. "They are lifting us," she breathed. "The creatures are lifting the ship." It was true. The wandering star groaned and shifted, but now it was moving in the other direction. Slowly, incredibly, it was rising. The creatures had gone beneath the hull and were using their bodies to support the weight. Thousands of pounds of metal, and they were holding it up. Sank into his chair. His face had turned pale. "This is not possible," he whispered. "They cannot coordinate like this. They cannot think like this." "They are not," said quietly. "Perhaps we should stop expecting them to act like us." Sung pressed his hand against the ship's hull and tapped, a message of thanks as best he could manage. From below, from beneath tons of metal and mud, he felt a tap in response. The creatures had heard him. They were answering. 5 more minutes passed, then 10. The storm hit its peak. The wind was so strong that Sung could not hear his own thoughts. The creatures around him pressed together, forming a cocoon of living mud. Inside it, he was protected. Outside it, the storm destroyed everything it touched. Then finally, he heard the sound he had been waiting for. The airlock hissed, the seal released, the door behind him slid open. Sung's voice was crying with relief. "Get inside now." He tried to move, but his body would not obey. The cold, the pain, the exhaustion, they had all caught up with him. He could barely lift his head. The creature on his arm pulled. It tugged him toward the open door. Other creatures pushed from behind. Together, like a team, they moved his body into the airlock. Sung fell onto the metal floor of the ship. The outer door closed behind him. For a moment he lay there, gasping for breath, too tired to move. Then the inner door opened and was there. She had dragged herself from the bridge on her broken leg. Blood soaked through the bandages on her calf. Her face was white with pain, but she had come for him. "You stupid, brave man," she said, and there were tears on her cheeks. "You did it." "Not just me," Sung managed. "They helped the creatures." Appeared behind. Together, the two women pulled Sung into the ship. As they did, Sung looked back at the closing airlock. The main creature was there, watching through the gap. Its body was badly damaged. Parts of it looked almost dead. But its eyes, or whatever it used to see, were fixed on him. Sung lifted his hand, a wave, a thank you. The creature pulsed one last time. Then the door closed between them. Inside, the ship was already at the flight controls. "The repairs," he asked, "will they hold?" "They will hold," Sung said from the floor. "I made sure of it." Crawled back toward the pilot's seat. Her leg left a trail of blood, but she did not stop. She was going to fly them out of here. Nothing would stop her. "The creatures are still under the ship," reported. "They are still holding us up." "We need to launch before the storm breaks the hull," said. "Can we do it without hurting them?" Everyone stopped, had asked if they could avoid hurting the creatures. The same creatures he had dismissed as mindless mud. The same beings he had wanted to run from. "We will launch slowly," said. "Minimum thrust until we clear the surface. That should give them time to move." "It will use more fuel," warned. "We may not make it to the nearest station." "We will make it," said. "And if we do not, at least we will have tried." She powered up the engines. The ship hummed with energy. Outside, beneath the hull, the creatures felt the vibration. They began to move, spreading out from under the ship, clearing a path. "They understand," said with wonder in her voice. "They know what we are doing." "Push the throttle forward." The wandering star rose from the mud of 7. Slowly at first, fighting gravity and storm. Then faster, pushing through the wind and rain. The acid beat against the hull, but the repairs held. The engines roared with power. Through the cockpit window, Sung watched the surface fall away. He could see the swamp spreading below them, dark and endless. And in that swamp he could see shapes moving. Hundreds of creatures, maybe thousands, watching the ship rise. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." The ship broke through the clouds and into clear space. Stars appeared above them, bright and cold and beautiful. Behind them, seven grew smaller and smaller until it was just a spot of gray and green in the darkness. Sung closed his eyes. He had done the impossible. He had fixed a ship in a storm that should have killed him, and he had made friends with beings that no one believed could exist. But the cost was not clear yet. His arms still burned, his face still bled, and somewhere inside him he knew that this was not over. The creature had given part of itself to save him. Now he needed to find a way to repay that gift, even if it took the rest of his life. Human mechanic fights a storm to save a spaceship. Something in the mud is alive. Part 5. The wandering star flew through the darkness between stars. Inside the medical bay, Sung sat on a bed while treated his wounds. The burn on his face would leave a scar. The acid had bitten deep into his cheek, marking him forever. But he was alive. That was what mattered. "Hold still," said as she applied healing gel to his arm. "The damage here is strange. The acid burned you badly, but something protected the deeper tissue, as if another substance covered your skin before the worst exposure." "The creature," Sung said. "It wrapped around my arm. It took the acid instead of me." Paused in her work. Her large eyes were soft with something like sadness. "It sacrificed part of itself for you." "Yes. Why would it do that?" Sung thought about the question. He had been thinking about it since they left 7. Why had the creature helped him? Why had it gathered its kind to lift the ship? Why had it returned his tool, blocked the wind, taken the acid that should have killed him? "I do not know," he admitted. "Maybe it saw that I was trying to help my friends. Maybe it understood what it feels like to care about others. Or maybe it was just curious about a strange being from the sky who did not run away when he saw it." "Humans are very strange," said quietly. "Any would have retreated to safety, would have calculated the risks and decided that survival was more important than connection." "Is that what you would have done?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I do not know anymore. Before today I would have said yes. Now I am not sure what I believe." In the cockpit, slept in the pilot's chair. Her leg was wrapped in proper bandages now, set and stabilized as best they could manage. She had refused to leave the controls until they were safely on course for Station 7. Only then had she allowed herself to rest. Sat in the captain's seat, watching the stars pass by. He had not spoken much since they escaped the planet. Something had changed in him. The experience had shaken loose something he had believed for his entire life. When Sung entered the cockpit, did not look away from the window, but he spoke. "I have been thinking about what we witnessed." Sung sat down in a nearby chair. His body ached with exhaustion, but he was too restless to sleep. "What have you concluded?" "Nothing, that is the problem." Turned to face him. "I have studied many species. Human. I believed I understood how intelligence works, how living beings make decisions. But those creatures on 7 broke every rule I thought I knew. Maybe the rules are wrong. Maybe," looked at his hands. "Or maybe I was simply too proud to see what was in front of me. You tried to communicate with them. I told you it was primitive, pointless. But you were right and I was wrong." Sung shrugged. "I did not have a better idea. I just tried something and hoped it would work." "That is what makes humans remarkable." Looked at him directly. "You try things. You reach out to the unknown. You do not calculate the risks first. You simply act. Sometimes that gets us killed. Sometimes it saves everyone." Stood and walked to the window. "When we reach station, I am going to file a report with the Galactic Survey. 7 must be reclassified. Those creatures must be recognized as intelligent life. They deserve protection." Sung felt surprised. "You would do that?" "It is the least I can do. They saved my ship. They saved my crew. They saved me." He paused. "And they did it for nothing, for no reward, no profit, just because a human asked them for help." The ship flew on through the darkness. Hours passed, took over the navigation while rested, woke briefly, checked their course, and fell asleep again. Sung found himself alone in the observation room, a small space with a large window that looked out at the stars. He stood there, watching the universe pass by, and thought about everything that had happened. His hand went to his arm, to the place where the creature had wrapped around him. The skin there was marked now, burned in a pattern that matched the creature's grip. It looked almost like a tattoo, a permanent record of what had been shared between them. He did not mind the marks. He did not see them as scars. They were proof. Proof that connection could happen anywhere with anyone if you were willing to reach out. Sung. He turned, stood in the doorway leaning heavily on a metal crutch. Her face was tired, but she was smiling. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." She moved slowly into the room and stood beside him at the window. "I wanted to thank you for everything. I was just doing my job." "No, you were not." She looked at him seriously. "Your job is to fix machines. You did much more than that. You found intelligent life that no one knew existed. You communicated with them. You made them understand that we needed help, and they helped us. They were curious about us. I think they wanted to understand why a strange creature from the sky was working so hard in the storm." "And what did you show them?" Sung thought about it. "That we do not give up, that we fight for the people we care about, that we are willing to suffer if it means saving our friends." Nodded slowly. "Maybe that is what makes us human, not our technology, not our strength, just that simple thing. We care about each other and we show it through our actions." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. "Do you think we will ever go back to 7? Asked. "I hope so. I would like to see them again, to thank them properly." Sung touched his arm. "And to learn more about them. They are intelligent, they communicate, they have a society, a culture maybe. There is so much we do not know." "The galaxy is full of unknown things," said, "and humans seem to have a talent for finding them. Finding them and making friends with them." She smiled. "That is the human way." The wandering star continued its journey toward station. In the days that followed, the crew grew closer. Asked Sung to teach her human methods of communication. Began writing his report, interviewing each crew member about their experiences. Healed slowly, and soon she was walking on her own again. When they finally reached the station, news of what had happened on 7 spread quickly. Scientists wanted to study the creatures. Reporters wanted to interview the crew. The story of the human mechanic who had fought a storm and made friends with alien life became famous across the sector. But Sung did not care about fame. He only cared about one thing. On the day before the ship was scheduled to leave for its next mission, he found a transport heading towards 7. It was a science vessel, full of researchers who wanted to study the creatures properly. They had room for one more passenger. "You are going back," said when he told her. It was not a question. "I have to. I owe them a debt that I can never fully repay, but I can try." She hugged him carefully, mindful of his healing wounds. "Come back safely." "I will, and next time I will bring you with me." She smiled. "I would like that." Sung boarded the science vessel and watched station grow small through the window. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, a swamp planet waited, a planet full of living mud and impossible creatures. He touched the marks on his arm. They did not hurt anymore. They had become part of him, a permanent reminder of what had happened. Some people would call them scars, signs of injury, of pain, of a day when things almost went very wrong. But Sung knew the truth. They were not scars. They were proof that even in the deepest mud, in the darkest storm, connection was possible. And that was the most human truth of all.